Welcome to the Society of Construction Law Australia podcast, the podcast where we look at legal and technical issues facing the Australian construction industry. My name's Melissa Yeo, and I'm chair of the Society's Communications Subcommittee. Today, I am pleased to be joined by Jon Davies, CEO of the Australian Constructors Association. Jon started out in the construction industry as a quantity surveyor, and since that time has gained over 30 years' experience in the industry, supporting the successful commercial delivery of projects in Australia, the Middle East, and the UK. Now, anyone who has had the opportunity to hear from Jon previously will know that he is a passionate advocate for change at every level of our industry. That's to ensure that it is sustainable, collaborative, and efficient going forward. Now, as they say, however, change is hard. Anyone who has ever tried to break a bad habit or indeed start a good one will certainly know that. So how are we meant to change an entire industry? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Jon, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Melissa. It's great to be here.
Very good. So for those listeners who are not familiar with the work of the ACA, can you please tell us briefly about what you do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the ACA has been around for quite some time now. To be quite honest, I don't think anyone knows quite how long it's been around, but certainly over 20 years now. And it represents the interests of the major contractors here in Australia. So the contractors that do the major projects, the sort of the mega projects, if you like, the $500 million and above projects. So we don't have a huge membership, but we have a very loud and interesting membership that is spread across both the infrastructure sector and the building and construction services sectors.
Excellent, excellent. Now, you recently delivered a seminar for the Society of Construction Law, and the title of that seminar was, Is COVID-19 Construction's Uber Moment? For those listeners who didn't get a chance to catch that presentation, if you are a member of SOCLA, and here's the plug, if you're not, please go sign up. But if you're a member, you can access that recording on our website. But in that presentation, you discussed the issues facing the construction industry and, of course, the causes of those issues. Can you tell us a bit about those?
I don't think it's a surprise to anyone in the industry that to hear that the industry's in a bad way, or that people wouldn't recognise the fact that the industry has struggled for quite some time now. But what we did last year was in response to Infrastructure Australia's 2019 infrastructure audit, which highlights all of the infrastructure that Australia needs to build to remain competitive. What it also does is it highlights the impediments to constructing that infrastructure as well. And they call on industry to make submissions as to how that can be overcome. So what we did was we actually engaged Biz Oxford Economics because we wanted our response to be very much data-driven and supported by an evidence-based. And so part of that, first part of that was to identify the real issues that industry does face. And when you look at it from a statistics point of view and look at the actual numbers, it's really quite scary. I mean, we have a profitability problem. We all hear contractors maybe moaning about the profitless boom. Well, there are actually statistics that back that up to say that no one is making any money, dare I say, apart from the lawyers, from the issues that are happening around mega projects. But we've also got some significant other issues as well. We have a productivity issue. Our industry, if we compare productivity growth in the construction industry with all other major industries, over the last 30 years, there's a 25% gap in productivity growth. And, okay, people have been listening to this thinking, yeah, so what does that mean? Well, if we were to just half that gap, we last year could have constructed an extra $10 billion worth of projects for the same level of investment. So that's very significant. But in terms of other issues that we have, more personal or related issues, we have a diversity problem. Only 12% of our workforce are female. And if we look at blue-collar workforce, that goes down to single digits. That goes down to around 2%.
Yeah.
And even worse, our workers are 6 times more likely to die from suicide than they are from a workplace incident, which talks to the culture that we have, or the cultural problem that we have in our industry. So there's a whole bunch of problems there. And then, as we all know, just over 12 months ago, along came COVID just to
add to it,
to sit over the top of that, yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, that was one of the things I noticed about your presentation when I watched it. Those statistics were scary. There's no other way to describe it. I mean, the fact, I think you said 12% of the workforce was female, but again, 2% in blue collar. That's really quite depressing. But the mental health statistics are also just, I mean, that has to change. There's no two ways about it. You indicated that COVID-19, for all of its horrible, horrible impacts, there could be a silver lining. It could be construction's Uber moment. Can you tell me a bit about why you think that might be the case?
The reason why I think that is the case is that we all know largely that the construction has problems. Maybe not the detail as I've just sort of explained there, but we've all known that we can do things a lot better than we have been doing. But we've lacked a burning platform for change. And so what I see is that COVID potentially provides us that burning platform. And why is that? Well, you have governments at all levels, federal government, state government, all looking at the construction industry to do the heavy lifting of economic repair, to lead us out of recession. We've sort of moved already out of recession now, but to take the economy forward. There's also a desire with that record level of investment to leverage the social and economic benefits of that spend. But at the same time, there's a real concern around whether industry has the capability and capacity to actually deliver on that record pipeline of work. And then further down the track, talking back to that productivity piece, there's a concern around, look, we're going to have to keep spending money on infrastructure irrespective of the state of the economy. If we want our economy to remain competitive, you have to keep investing in infrastructure. It can't stop. But we just spent all of this money on JobKeeper, JobSeeker, all of these things now that when we come to say, well, okay, we need to build some infrastructure here, where's the money going to come from? So we've got to find a way, and government is very keen to find a way to build more with less. And that sort of then comes back to that capability and capacity piece as well, that if we do have a problem there, and at the minute it's all very anecdotal, I think people can point to particular shortfalls, signalling engineers from rail perspective, and IA are going to do a piece of work around trying to actually map how big a problem, if there is a problem. But I think generally speaking, it's logical to say that there will be capability and capacity constraints given the volume of work that's coming through. How do we address that? We have closed borders. So even if we wanted to bring people in, we're going to struggle to do that. But even if the borders were open, I was in a panel discussion the other week with peers from around the world. Actually, Melissa, it was hosted by the Canadian Contractors Association. And what that showed was that, and this shouldn't be any great surprise to any of us, is that economies, governments around the world will all be turning to construction of infrastructure to lead their own economies out of recession. So there will be a global competition for resource. And while sure, we have a bit of an advantage when it comes to tapping into that, because we're a great place to live. We did a good job with COVID. It's a nice place to live. I mean, obviously, from my accent, I wasn't originally from Australia.
Says both foreigners in the room.
That's right. So there are obvious attractions to come in here, but it's not going to go anywhere close to addressing the shortfall that we're potentially going to be looking at. So what is the solution when it takes 7 years to train an engineer from start to being something approaching useful? The only solution that we can look at, well, there's two. One is that we need to focus on better engaging with the half the working population that currently decides that they don't want to work with us, the women.
Yep.
And also we need to find ways to do more with less.
Yep.
So we've got all of these issues that are coming together, and where industry is looking for government to take the lead, and government is looking for industry to help them. So you've got this burning platform now where both sides, the clients and industry, both need each other. And so I think that is our opportunity for change.
Absolutely. Well, I think, nothing contributes to change more than necessity. And I mean, certainly on a much less serious scale in the legal industry, when everyone had to start working from home, and there used to be all of this concern about flexible working, and goodness, we can't really let that happen. But it happens. And then once you realize, it has to happen, it's actually quite efficient, and you can drive that change, and then you come out the other side and you might even surprise yourself. So just working together to actually get it done, because you have to now, it's not a choice, I think is really interesting. I will confess I couldn't help but notice that you were a panelist on a webinar last night with the title, Is It Time to Punt the Lawyers? And my question is always, how can we help the situation? How can we help drive change? And I attended that webinar. I recorded the results of the first question, which was, is it time to punt the lawyers? And I was horrified at the question. But anyhow, 21% of people in attendance at that webinar said yes. 33% were unsure. That's alarming to me. But in any event, I'm a bit disappointed that it wasn't asked again at the end of the webinar. But look, can you tell me a bit about how that question has arisen, for starters? I mean, the fact that people are asking the question is something I think we need to think about. And also, I think I know your answer, but what are your views on that?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, it was obviously deliberately provocative question. There is a small group of individuals that are really trying to promote dialogue around all of these things, which I'm very keen, and ACA is very keen to support. For those of you, if you look up on LinkedIn and search the hashtag #HardConvo, you'll come across it. I certainly don't think that we should be punting lawyers. I think it's fair to say that if we'd had that poll at the end again, we would have come out with I would be surprised if anyone would have agreed that it was a good idea. Someone did raise the point during the conversation that we should punt the bad lawyers, and there was a recognition that the two lawyers on the panel were definitely not in that category, and I think they did a very good job of sort of talking to how lawyers can really have an impact and a role to play in making our industry more sustainable. And ultimately, we all have a vested interest in making our industry more sustainable. And there are ways, many ways that the lawyers can play their part in that. I mean, I gave an example. We've been having, as ACA, conversations with Infrastructure New South Wales. New South Wales government have their 10-point commitment to industry, which includes things like equitable approach to risk allocation and standard forms of contract. And we've sort of raised with them, well, we don't think you're doing a great job of following that at the moment. And we're trying to understand why that is. I don't think it's a lack of will. There's certainly a capability and capacity issue within most delivery agencies currently, and they're dealing with that by, unsurprisingly, outsourcing work. So they outsource work to, certainly from a contract formation to law firms. And I think that there maybe is a communication gap there in terms of their expectations around what they would like to see them do versus the law firm's traditional view of what they think the client is looking for them to do, which is generally to try to protect their interests as far as possible through and pass as much risk as possible over the fence to the contractor. But I think that is changing, and I think that all of us have a role to play here in calling out some of these poor behaviours that we all know and have seen, especially those of us that have got to that stage in our careers where we are privileged enough to be in a position to influence outcomes. And I think we can all play our part in this journey.
I think one of the important things too is certainly not attributing blame. I mean, the important thing is there are issues, and all right, what do we need to do to fix it? From my perspective, I'd be very hesitant to say, oh, it's the lawyer's fault or it's, anybody else's fault. Because, I mean, again, there's so many inputs and things that go into how people deliver the product that they deliver, and one of the things you touched on, communication. So many of us are terrible at it. So many of us don't ask the right questions, but don't even know that we're not asking the right questions in any capacity, let alone, in this industry. Just in terms of appreciating that there's a problem. Every other week, there's a headline in the Courier Mail about another contractor that's failed, and you just know that can't continue. I mean, I
just researched this actually yesterday, funny enough. The statistic for the last financial year is that construction companies account for, I think it's just over 25% of all insolvencies, all business failures in Australia.
That's absolutely huge. I'd be interested to see what that statistic is after COVID, if it's actually changed or not. You mentioned before collaboration is not a form of contract. That's something I actually wrote down. You mentioned it last night. I wrote it down because I thought, yes, absolutely. And people discussed ways of incentivizing that sort of behavior. Do you have any ideas for, what sorts of incentives might be implemented that, are appropriate? Because obviously there's things that you can do and things that you can't do. But, things that would be very efficient at driving those behaviors. Because I think intuitively humans would prefer to be collaborative than adversarial. I mean, I'm a disputes lawyer and I much prefer being collaborative, in life. But yeah, I mean, in terms of really what would be incredibly effective at driving that behavior?
I think there's a number of things. One, which almost sounds sort of counterintuitive, is to focus on disputes. I too often the culture on a particular project will go downhill rapidly when disputes start to arise. Your traditional stuff. I put an extension of time claim in for 2 weeks, and you turn around to me and say, "Well, that's garbage, John. I'm not even going to give you a day." Oh God, how can you possibly say that? And and then that starts slowly, claim after claim, to have an impact on working.
Well, it just hangs around like a bad smell.
Absolutely.
For a year.
And
until you have the wrap-up arbitration at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And so relationships gradually deteriorate. And so any sort of collaboration quickly dries up. And so I'm actually a big fan of DRBs, dispute resolution boards.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually... Interestingly, along with this role that I have, comes a seat on the board of the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation. So
with Stephen Callahan, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
He's there as well. So I'd be sacked off that board if I didn't at least make one mention to DRBs. But I do believe that absolutely that they have a part to play in taking that dispute away from the people that are trying to collaborate at site. Take it away from them. They say, okay, you've put your letter in, you've stated your case. Don't worry about that now. That's going to be taken away, and someone else is going to look at that away. And you carry on. You get on with the job and get on with collaborating with each other. So I think that is a key component of this. I think tied to this, and again, I'm probably going to be a wee bit controversial here, and this is why I support NEC as a form of contract. There needs to be a bit more reciprocity in some of these contracts. We have a lot of deeming provisions in existing contracts that deal with contractors and what they do. If you don't submit your EOT claim within 2 weeks, then you're deemed not to have got a claim. But there's nothing in there that talks about a client's obligations or a contract administrator's obligations. So you're deemed to respond to something. You should respond to something within 2 weeks. Well, if you haven't done that, well, I'm sorry, it's deemed to be approved. That's the sort of reciprocity that NEC has.
On the topic of DRBs, I've done a podcast with Stephen previously. He called it cheap insurance for dispute resolution or something to that effect. And obviously he's incredibly knowledgeable about DRBs. But one thing that you just mentioned, which I hadn't appreciated previously, the idea of just removing that dispute from the people who do the day-to-day. And that seems quite powerful if the people who are administering the contract don't actually have to worry about what's going on with that EOT or that variation. They just get on with the business of administering the contract. That seems like that could also be an interesting culture.
Well, that's right, because ultimately, if you ask for something and someone says no, you can't help but take that personally, can you? You can't. You just can't divorce yourself from that. So if you then get a run of asking for things and being constantly told no, then it's going to have an impact on your relationship with that person that's saying no. So if we're all
says most married couples.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I think that it is a bit of a no-brainer, really. But you're right. People, I don't think, appreciate just how much of an impact, positive impact, that can have, taking that dispute away from the people that we're relying on to have collaborative, positive working relationships.
I think you mentioned that you favour the NEC suite of contracts. Is that because they might be more user-friendly, in your view?
Yeah, they are written in plain English. The same clause references throughout the suite. So if you're looking at payment, it's the same clause reference, regardless of which form of contract you're looking at. I would say, look, I mean, NEC is one suite of contracts, and I do think that they have a lot in their favour. But I wouldn't say I'm particularly tied to one over another. What I'd say is a bigger issue for us as an industry, a huge issue for us as an industry, is the prevalence of bespoke contracts and the need for bespoke contracts.
Yesterday was the reference to, I believe one of the panelists referred to a 800-word or 800-page contract, which was just a portion of the contract. And by the time you got through the whole thing, it was in the thousands or something. That seems daunting.
And I thought Owen Hayford made the point as well that we're very good, and this doesn't just apply to contracts, this applies to a whole range of things, that we're very good at adding things. And that's why the concept value stream mapping came about, because it provides an opportunity. Well, let's take stock here and let's go back and revisit all those additions we've added to a particular process over time and see whether they're still relevant and still see whether they're still adding value. We don't do that with contracts. We're very good at adding stuff, but not subtracting stuff. And I thought that was a good observation. But I think we need to have that value stream mapping exercise now. We need to, if we're not going to adopt alternate standard forms of contract and start from scratch, we've got to do more in that area.
Something that has struck me is technology and what role does technology have to play? Now, of course, we look around at the growth that we've seen just in the last 10 years with respect to what we can do on our mobile phone. I mean, surely there would be room for technological development in the industry, and that would obviously have a knock-on effect to culture and the way contracts are drafted and administered and all of that. Can you tell me where you see technology opportunities in our industry for that?
There's a huge opportunity is the short answer to that. There's an absolutely enormous opportunity there. And the opportunity, the problem is not that we don't know how to do things better, that there isn't the technology there to do it. You look at BIM, which a lot of people now call digital engineering, and that as a concept has been around for 30 years. BIM was first coined around about 30 years ago, building information modeling. And
I remember watching presentations on it like 10 years ago.
Look, that's right.
And I still haven't seen
No.
a project with BIM.
And it's
that could just be me.
And it's the same. It's the same with lean construction. Lean construction as a concept came around 30 years ago. And you look. Let's focus on BIM specifically. I think the numbers are between 10 and 12% savings over the life cycle of an asset if BIM is utilised. So significant savings. despite the fact that it's been around 30 years, we're not using it. We get really excited if we see a 3D model on a computer screen and think we've cracked it. And yet that is level one of about 10 different levels of BIM maturity. So why is that? Well, my view on that, and this comes back to contracts, is that at its heart, BIM, digital engineering, and a lot of these other technology solutions rely on open and transparent sharing of information.
Yep. And
yet we have the contracts that we use drive exactly the opposite behaviors. We hang on to information because I could maybe use that in a claim against you, or you could use that to defend a claim from me. So we don't like sharing that information, especially information about what happens when things go wrong. So that's a real problem. If we were trying to get better and we're not sharing information and learning from when things go wrong, is it any surprise that things aren't getting any better?
So is that a culture piece? Is that a contracting piece? Is that everything all wrapped up?
It's a lot of things, but I think this is absolutely something where I think the contract is a big part to play. And if we get into sort of technicalities around BIM in particular, then you have questions around IP, who owns the IP. But
I was going to say that. Yeah, I think that's.
But that's not an insurmountable problem. And ultimately, if we're all sharing of information, the other issue is, well, if something does go wrong, how do we identify who's liable when we've all contributed to this with this one big model? But if we move towards away from that blame culture to a collaborative culture, and we look at, well, this will be another challenge given the professional indemnity market currently, but we look to project-specific insurance that takes away that individual issue of identifying liability. Then we can start to focus more on collaboration.
Yeah. You've given us a lot to think about, Jon, and thank you so much. Now, I'm going to ask you the very hard question. What do we do? How do we make it happen?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, Melissa, because we think we have a plan. We have a way forward.
Excellent.
And this is industry and government coming together. This isn't an ACA initiative. This isn't a Jon initiative. This is a whole of industry solution and way forward. What we've seen in the UK with the collapse of Carillion a few years back now, the UK government said, we can't afford for that to happen again. So what they did was they came up with a construction services playbook, or a government services playbook, which essentially set out best practice procurement and delivery for outsourcing of government services. And it was hugely successful. So they said, well, what can we adapt this model? Can we use this model elsewhere? And they said, well, where else do we have a problem? Construction industry. So they came together with the Construction Leadership Council in the UK, which is a representative body of industry associations, construction industry associations in the UK, and said, we'd like to work with you on this. And this was pre-COVID. COVID came along, and that really accelerated the process. They developed a playbook, a construction playbook, in under 12 months. And talking to the chair of the CLC in the UK, said that would never have happened but for COVID. I think that we can really, that is a great example for us to follow here in Australia. There's already a broad acceptance of what the problems are within industry, and probably just as equally a broad acceptance as to what the solutions are, along the lines of the things that we've been talking about just now. But what we're not doing is actually getting on and doing that. And what the playbook is, it documents all that best practice. So we could draw on things like the Construction Industry Leadership Forum practice notes in certain areas, and we could develop this best practice document. And what they do in the UK is the UK government says to its delivery agencies, you've got to use that or explain why you're not doing that. Here, obviously, we've been having conversations with the federal government around how that could work. They sort of rightly point out the fact that, well, we're a little bit different to the UK. We have a federated model here in Australia, so it works a little bit differently. But it doesn't really, if we look at the states as delivery agencies, then it doesn't. Yes, okay, they're a bit more vocal than delivery agencies in the UK. But we could actually incentivize them to utilize this, because this is all about improving outcomes. If we improve outcomes from a productivity perspective, for example, we could say to the states, look, we will share those savings with you. You can feed that back into your budgets, build more infrastructure, provide more services, whatever it is. So that the states could be really incentivized to doing that. So what we're looking to do as ACA is build an industry coalition together to call for a playbook. We've already had huge levels of support, indications of support around getting behind this concept, and I might be having a separate conversation with you, Melissa, about getting SOCLA as a signatory to this as well, because we're looking for a cross industry, not just contractors. We're looking for consultants. Consult Australia are very much interested in this. We've been talking to Roads Australia, Australasian Railways Association. Across the board interest in this, because this could really shift the dial.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Jon. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you are interested in learning more about Jon's work with the Australian Constructors Association and what you can do to help drive sustainable change in the industry, visit their website at constructors.com.au. And while you're at it, make sure you head on over to our website, scl.org.au, where you'll find information about what the Society is currently working on, industry news and resources, and of course, details as to the Society's upcoming events. And if you're not already a member, you can sign up there too, scl.org.au. Thanks for listening.